Hello and welcome to this video by Ruth from Artful Stampin'. This video is taken from a very long 2-hour live session that I did on YouTube the other day, and I've kind of tried to condense it down and give you the sped up version and highlighting the main features of it so that I could just kind of share the information that I found out with you without you having to watch the 2-hour session. So I decided I wanted to try and have a go using my silicone mat, kind of like a Gelli Plate. I know it's not exactly like it, but I thought it would be fun to see what qualities it had and what I could do with it. So to start off with, I used some white acrylic paint and then sprinkled some brushes onto it, then sprayed it with water. I'm making a good old mess basically, but I kind of went into this experience knowing that it was just about having a go and seeing what happened rather than trying to be too precious. And yeah, basically it's lots of playing and experimenting, which I do recommend that you do in your craft room from time to time rather than having a fixed idea of what you want to achieve. So I used the Whisper White cardstock, just the normal one that we use for stamping, and I put that over the stencils and the silicone mat, and this is what came off. Just some lovely kind of printing. Now the stencil, the lattice style one that you can see there, and the leafy one all come from the incredible Like You project kit. The laser cut rectangle is one that you're meant to place over some cardstock, and the leafy stencils are actually what you take out those green glimmer leaves that you push out, and that's what I used. So it's useful to kind of look at some of these project kits and think, what else can I do with them? You know, I love them because they are just there, they've got everything in them and you can get on with creating, but sometimes it's nice to see what else that you can do with them. So the other thing I did was to experiment with putting some more brushes, but this time I think I tried to put less water, and also I mixed the brushes actually into the paint before trying to get a impression from it. So last time I literally had the paint, then sprinkled the brushes, then spritzed, but this time I actually mixed some of the brusho paint and allowed the moisture from the acrylic paint to mix with the brushes and activate it, because it's basically a very highly pigmentized powder. Now Stampin' Up are not going to be selling the brushes as from the 4th of June, but are coming out with a new product that I don't know what it's like yet, but I'm going to be sure to get it because I do love playing with this kind of mixed media, getting messy kind of stuff. So I'm sure I'll be back to show you what it's like. So here's another stencil from that kit. It's kind of supposed to be like oranges and limes segments. And I, again, spritzed with a bit of water, and this is the results. Isn't that beautiful? I love all those pinky, yellowy oranges in the background there. So if you can hear my children in the background, it's because it's half term and I have to ask them to keep their voices down, but they're sort of chattering around in the background. So if you hear them, that's what they are. So then when I lifted off that print, as it were, it was really nice to have all the oranges and yellows then on that laser paper. And you'll see me go on to use that for something else. Then I decided to have a go using re-inkers, and again I put down some white acrylic paint, put some re-inker down, and then spritzed it with water, kind of kept squishing it in and just seeing what would happen. And I tried to take a print lift off this. Now as you see, it wasn't as successful for whatever reason, not quite sure why, but it was worth having a go just to see what would happen. It's useful if you're going to be working like this to have lots of either towels or scrap fabric around, or toweling just to dab up the excess water and mess that you create, and to wipe your hands, and yeah, it can get pretty messy. So this lift didn't kind of work so well, and I'm not sure here if I added an extra bit of water to see if it would work. But I guess just, you know, don't be afraid if it doesn't work. You can always use that piece of paper for something else. You can get a double print and, you know, There we go, there's a little bit better results there. So this time I decided to actually mix the brushes with some water, so I sprinkled it into a palette. Now I've had these brushes for nearly a year now, and so I'm finding I'm probably getting to the end of them. They have been used a lot, and when I say a lot, I mean a lot, because I don't just use it for personal use, I use it for business, and whenever I'm doing workshops, they do get used, and I've done several workshops using these with children as well. They love brushes. For I think they like the surprising element of it. You know, they sprinkle it on and then they spritz the water, and they just love it. So what I've done is I've got a paintbrush onto my clean silicone mat and sprinkled some of the paint directly onto it. And I experimented with different types of cardstock. So this is just the normal Stampin' Up card. Then I also dug out of my stash some shimmer paper and some watercolour paper, just to see the difference that the different types of cardstock and paint, you know, have. And again, that is worth experimenting with. It's not always about the ink or the colour or the, you know, how you're doing it. The paper, the type of paper has a huge effect on results. So I didn't really like the results I was getting. It was all a bit too splattery, and so I think I just ended up putting more water on to get this more watery look, which is really lovely. It's very muted, but really sweet and pretty, and you know, great for other things. Then I had to go just sort of painting splodges of colour on, and having a go, seeing what happens. So my silicone mat, as you can see, took quite a beating. It's still really, you know, it's not damaged at all from all this paint and, you know, brayering and cleaning, and, you know, it really is quite forgiving. So it is such a good investment, this. It's useful also for doing hot gluing to save your fingers. Right, so there we go. There's a kind of a squishy, squelchy, watercolory mess there, but useful for a background. Often I create these backgrounds and just keep them in a pile in a box, ready for when I want to have an interesting background for something. And then just by adding a sentiment or some other little embellishments, it's really really great to have those on hand, rather than having to get all my wet stuff out again and making another background. It's useful to have those in a box. So with all the little pieces that I created, so this was probably about an hour into the process, I'd made all these backgrounds and played a lot. I decided I wanted to make a scrapbook layout using what I'd played with. And so this is kind of like the second phase, as it were, to my creating. I dug out of my stash 2 pieces of 12 by 12 white cardstock, and then put some coloured ink onto the edge of an acrylic block. Then I sprayed that acrylic block with just plain old water and got a paintbrush and splattered, basically swiped the brush over the watery inky corner or the edge, and just splattered that onto my page to create splatters on my page. In my mind, because that it was an evening when I was doing this, during that day I'd been to the beach with my children and I had some nice photographs. So in my mind I was thinking I'd like to make a layout using those photographs from today, and some of the colours that I'd experimented with were kind of like oranges and blues, and so I ended up just picking out those colours, those playings, the collages and the inks and prints that I'd made with those particular colours. So initially I thought I was going to do kind of more of a what size is that, 4x6 or just under matte, but then I decided to half that, and so these ended up being more like just under a 4x3, or about a 4x3 but less than that, matting layers. So I cut 4 rectangles out of the crushed curry cardstock, but I didn't like how yellow it was, if that makes sense. I wanted it to be much more grungy, so I used the Artistic Expressions. No, I always get this wrong. I get muddled up between these two sets. Artisan Textures. I used that, the big stamp, to create an edge along it with Grapefruit Grove ink, and I was so much happier after that. Now obviously I haven't got my photographs yet, I haven't printed them out, so I just wanted to create these matting layers ready for my photographs to go into. Then I just tore, I hardly use scissors actually, I just tore strips of the just sort of the prints, and you know, that I'd done, that I wasn't really that, it was just colour, you know, and I just wanted to have those as textures in the background. Then I really wanted to use the one that I'd lifted from the orange and lime segment laser cut piece. I wanted to have that in the background. And then I pulled in some of those green glimmer paper leaves, which to me kind of reminded me of seaweed, and there was a lot of seaweed on the seashore that day, so it kind of all fitted in with the theme. Then the lattice that I'd used for creating the print, because that now was all a lovely greeny, bluey, yellowy colour, I then tore that up and had that poking out from behind the matting layers. I then got some linen thread, which you will see in a second, but I want to tell you this because I'm nearing the end of the video and sometimes I run out of time to tell you stuff. So from the Share What You Love embellishment kit, which is again retiring this year, there's a lovely thread in there which I discovered was too soft really to have it in sort of in circles around my hand and just put down, that I can do with the metallic thread. It's really easy to do that, but with this thread it's so soft that you have to kind of almost let it fall onto your page and then stick a label over the top. So the labels in the embellishment kit just really lent themselves to that, so I grabbed a couple out, and as you can see here I'm kind of playing with the thread. I wrapped it around my fingers, but it was just too soft. It was just like kind of flopping around and it wasn't holding its shape. So I decided to use a technique that I've seen another scrapbooker on YouTube. I'll have to try and find her name, but she does this a lot. She just gets ordinary thread and she just bunches it up and sticks it on her layouts, and it just gives this beautiful kind of very ethereal extra texture, which is so pretty to her work. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed watching me make this. I'm going to be making a second layout with the other bits and pieces and putting that on YouTube as well. And I will also be putting the accompanying photographs on my blog. So if you want to see close-up photos, do have a look at those. Anyway, thank you for watching, and take care for now. Bye!